Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Woolfolk again. Woolfolk the other way at the 30, the 40. Woolfolk to midfield. Miles Woolfolk with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Now, one fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6.
Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right.
Throws to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag.
Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll to the far side.
Now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Payson in the end zone for the touchdown! They are going to play for left-handed. Was rolling out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys, as always, on a Sunday night edition of the podcast, coming at you here a little bit earlier than we normally do. It was a Friday night game, so we go a night earlier on the recap. We do have stuff that we're going to be doing tomorrow night, and so we figured, why not give it to you guys a day early rather than wait until Tuesday to recap this game? Because this one, look, a heartbreaking loss for the Tar Heels. There's no doubt about that, but certainly much more exciting in terms of the stuff we get to talk about here tonight, as opposed to what we've been talking about here recently, the games we've been talking about here recently, with Carolina really struggling in those games, just getting blown out. This was a much more competitive game, and so we'll give you all our takeaways here tonight on this edition of the podcast with what happened on Friday night. And of course, we do have, one other recruiting note that I do want to give to you guys at the end of the podcast. So stick around for that when it's all said and done. But Carolina goes on the road, takes on the Cal Golden Bears. And, this was a game that I think a lot of us thought, going into it, California, the way they had been playing, at least early on in the season, we thought there was a chance that this was a game where Carolina was going to get blown off the field again. We thought, the way that their true freshman quarterback had been playing, this was set up for him to have another big game. I mean, they were averaging 255 yards passing. Carolina, of course, giving up a ton of passing yards in their last game, almost 400 passing yards to Cade Klubnik and the Clemson Tigers in their last game. And so this was a matchup that I don't know how many of us went in with expectations, but Carolina comes right down to the end. They have a chance to take the lead late in the game as Nathan Leacock is going into the end zone and unfortunately fumbles. And it ends in a loss for the Tar Heels, 21-18, a heartbreaking loss. Very similar to some of the losses that we suffered under Mac Brown. But there was a debate going on, and I want to get your opinion on this, Josh, about where this ranks in terms of the losses this season. I mean, there were a lot of people that said that they would have rather lost in blowout fashion than lost the way that we lost the other night. I'm on the other side of it. I think even though it is heartbreaking and it certainly is a tough way to lose a game, the fact that Carolina at least looked competent, at least gave some fight in this game, I think was very encouraging and should at least give you hope that the rest of the season isn't going to be a complete train wreck like we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, on the surface, given the circumstance, because it was a 10:30 kick on a Friday, maybe you would have rather gotten blown out so you didn't stay up till almost 2 a.m. watching Carolina lose. On the other side, that's I'd rather be tired and exhausted because I thought my team had a chance to win as opposed to getting skull drug like I thought they were going to after the way the game started. Carolina fumbles first offensive play. It's not, 4 plays later, California is in the touchdown or is in the end zone. But you got to give Carolina credit. For the first time since Bill Belichick has spoken about progress and development, they look like a team that during the bye week got better. And they played some fundamental football at times. They played some field position football at times where because the defense kept them in it, they could afford to punt and just kind of play field position, which was a staple of Bill Belichick during his time at the NFL. So I'd much rather lose the other night the way we lost the other as opposed to getting blown out because you had a chance. It gives you really a reason to stay somewhat invested and connected into the team. Because, like, if they would have went out there and lost again by 4 touchdowns, what's the interest level for the final 6 games? There probably isn't any. With the fact that they looked the way they looked the other night, you could see them beating maybe a Syracuse on the road. Could they beat Stanford at home? Can they be competitive against their in-state rivals? So, maybe because of the circumstances, fans would have rather been blown out so they could have gotten to bed earlier. But from a fan perspective and as a supporter perspective, I'll always advocate I'd rather watch my team lose in heartbreaking fashion as opposed to looking like they didn't belong, which has been the case in previous losses, TCU, Central Florida, and Clemson.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Central Florida, I think, is a team. I mean, I know they won the other night against West Virginia. West Virginia is right there with Oklahoma State and was with Carolina for the worst teams that we've seen so far this year. I still think, Carolina is probably in that category of one of the worst power conference teams that we've seen so far this year. But I mean, still, to me, I'm with you. I would much rather compete. I would much rather have a game where you walk away and say to yourself, at least this team was giving effort and gave you a little bit of hope for the rest of the season where, yeah, as you said, you can now imagine that maybe this team does win a game on the road against Syracuse. Maybe they do win a game at home against Stanford, where before that, it was hard to imagine Carolina winning a game, period, because of the way that they had been blown off the field. I mean, Stanford, you look at them, they're much better than I think we thought they were going to be. They've already got 2 wins so far this year. Now, granted, they're against 2 of the teams that I think are right there at the bottom of the ACC along with Carolina. But at the same time, they've still found a way to win both of those games. They are going to have to go on the road. That's going to be a little bit different for them as opposed to their win at home against Boston College and then a win at home last night against Florida State. But now for Carolina, this gives you some hope for that game because I think if the result had been Carolina gets blown out and you still get a win like that from Stanford, we're probably sitting here saying, yeah, there's not a win on the schedule left for Carolina. So what ended up happening in this game? Where did it go wrong for Carolina? What was the difference in the game? Really, I think the biggest thing was the 2 fumbles that unfortunately for Carolina turned the game in Cal's favor. You had, the first offensive snap of the game. Shenard Clower takes a screenplay, gets the ball punched out, and California recovers. The Golden Bears would go on to, of course, score a touchdown on their opening drive and went up 7-0. That one, it seems important because if they don't score on that opening drive, the way that Carolina played defensively, you wonder if Carolina would have been in control of this game and potentially, been able to hold on for a victory. That would have been huge for Carolina just to be in control of a game that was against a power conference opponent this year because they have not been in that space so far yet this season. And then, of course, the big one, the one where Carolina has a chance to go up. You never know what could have ended up happening. They still could have lost the game because California drives down the field and scores a touchdown. But Carolina, the way they were playing defensively, you thought they had a chance to win this game. If Nathan Leacock ends up scoring, he's going into the end zone after a beautiful completion over the middle of the field from Gio Lopez to him. he has a chance to score the touchdown. And as he's going in, the ball gets punched out of his hands at about the 6-inch line. He scrambles and tries to recover it in the left corner of the end zone. But unfortunately, California able to jump on top of it in the back left corner of the end zone. And that was all she wrote for Carolina. Unfortunately, they were unable to stop the ground game of the Cal Golden Bears the rest of the game. And so Cal ends up walking out with the defeat. I mean, both of those moments definitely tough for Carolina, but two guys that, Shenard Clower ends up getting the start for Carolina. I know he's been playing better here recently, but could have debated whether or not he should have been on the field. And same thing with Nathan Leacock there towards the end of the game. So 2 fumbles from guys that are depth receivers on this team. Part of the reason why you sort of question some of the personnel that Carolina may have had out there on the field on Friday night.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Although there's been something that this staff with Clower, I mean, ever since the Central Florida game, there's been a commitment to him being on the field. And I'm not going to say force feeding him the football, but almost utilizing him in a way that we'd like them to utilize maybe Kobe Paysour, Jordan Shipp, and some other guys that we think are more gifted receivers than him and Leacock. But that's not the way that it went down. Now, Kobe Paysour did have his coming out party, the best game so far this season for Carolina. But, yeah, those 2 plays directly impacted the game because the turnover on the first play gives California a short field. They go on to score a touchdown, and then you commit the turnover, just inside, I think, the 4-minute mark, but you can't get the football back. And I do think it's reasonable to expect, with the way that Carolina's defense had played, had they scored the touchdown, you convert the extra point. Now Cal's got to drive, you would expect 75 yards to win the game because it would be 25-21 as opposed to 24-21. They could not play for a field goal. They have to go get a touchdown. And I think that's what's really frustrating. If it was maybe a situation where Carolina was only going to be up by a field goal, then maybe it's a lot harder to say Carolina holds on and win. But I think you could have put enough trust in Carolina's defense to not give up a touchdown drive with the way they had played after the opening possession of the game, where they only had to defend 22 yards before they gave up a touchdown. So that's what's really frustrating, and it really highlights and emphasizes, and I think Bill Belichick and the coaching staff is aware of this, the way this roster is constructed. There's not much margin for error. So those 2 plays could be the difference between a win and a loss. And they quite literally were for Carolina the other night. It'd be interesting to see with the accountability that this coaching staff has kind of rolled with. Will those guys be as involved in the game plan this upcoming week, or will they go to maybe some other guys in that wide receiver room? But there's no doubt, for me, there was 2 things that stood out to me in the loss. The first one with those 2 fumbles because of the way they impacted the first and final possession of the ball game.
Yeah, I mean, it was huge for the direction of the game overall. I mean, yeah, you set them up with an easy scoring drive right out of the gate that gave them control of the game. They scored again in that first quarter, went up 14-7 on Carolina. And so that was certainly, something that Carolina was at a disadvantage right out of the gate. So no doubt that I think those were a big part of the issue for Carolina in this game. The other big issue for Carolina was they were not able to get off the field on 3rd down. That was a really big issue on the scoring drives. Carolina, did a good job when Cal didn't put together scoring drives of getting off the field, but the Cal 6 of 16, 4 conversions out of those 6 came on drives in which they scored touchdowns. More importantly, the bigger issue for Carolina was that 4 of the conversions came from 3rd and 9 or longer. So Carolina got them in advantageous situations. They were able to win on 1st and 2nd down. I thought they did that most of the night. But then when it came to 3rd down, Carolina just unable to find a way to get off the field. I mean, a 3rd and 18 converted on one of those scoring drives. that leads to a first down. I mean, that just can't happen. Those are areas where you've got to find a way to get off the field. And yeah, part of that is that Carolina still wasn't able to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. The other part is that guys on the back end of this defense have to be able to hold up in those third down scenarios like that. So I thought that was really the other big issue for Carolina, was that when Cal got into those third down situations, there were times where Carolina was able to make stops, but the times they didn't, it was extremely important and led to successful drives for Cal.
And it's been a theme all season long. There have been times, even before games got out of hand against TCU, Central Florida, and Clemson, where Carolina won on first, they won on second down, and got the opposition in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, and just quite literally could not get off the field. Now, part of that does have to do with the lack of pass rush and the ability to have a guy that can pin his ear back and just go get after the quarterback. And that's a definite issue that Carolina hopefully will address this upcoming offseason via high school recruiting, hopefully more importantly through the transfer portal. But the other night, when you have 4 of those instances get converted against you, those are backbreaking. And really there were times where Carolina was, when I was mentioning they were playing that field position battle, if they get off the field on that 3rd and 18, you're probably getting the ball at your 40-yard line, your 45-yard line, and now you don't got to drive as far as you're having to drive whenever you allow scoring drives to happen, or you give up those first downs, or even if you're forcing a punt. Well, now they're still flipping the field on you, and this offense, as we've grown to see through the first 6 games, is not built, is not equipped to drive the length of the field 5-6 times to get points. And so, you look at it in totality, and they were 6. Cal was just 6 of 16 on third down. But let's just say you take away those 4 conversions on 3rd and 8 or longer. Well, now they're down to 2 of 16. It's really hard to win football games when you're 2 of 16 on third down, and it kind of comes back to what I mentioned there with the fumbles. Carolina's margin for error is just so slim that, those plays that even if they're in the second quarter, maybe even early in the third quarter, they impact results. And that was my second biggest takeaway. It was the second thing I said to you when we talked about the game yesterday after I got back from my road trip. Can't fumble the football. You can't give up 4 conversions of 3rd and 8. And so, that was the big reason why Carolina ultimately got beat. And it's why we kind of come away feeling somewhat uneven because, Carolina lost, but they did a lot of good the other night, and a lot of good that hopefully they can build on here moving forward.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of that here coming up. Don't worry about that. We're going to get into some of the good stuff. But, when you talk about not being able to get off the field, a big part of it is that, you don't have that guy that can win up front. We saw, a good night from Tyler Thompson. Only played 22 snaps, though, so he wasn't out there consistently, wasn't able to consistently get pressure on the quarterback. Smith Vilbert, one of his better games that he's played, if you just look at Pro Football Focus grades and the way that he graded out, he only had 2 pressures in this game. So it's just not consistent from Carolina on those third downs. I thought they did a really good job of getting creative with some of the blitzes that they were throwing at them. But there were times where Sagapuatele, who is really talented, was able to just stand in there and make throws. There was one blitz in particular. I don't remember which third down it was, but they end up blitzing Kamori House, and it leaves the middle of the field open. Sagapuatele makes a nice throw, even though he takes a big hit, and the drive ends up continuing. So, that's sort of the thing that you have to sort of balance if you're Carolina about being aggressive with the blitz, is making sure that you can cover the middle of the field and take it away. That was one of their biggest issues. And one of the other things that they weren't able to really do a good job of in this game, but I didn't think it really necessarily killed them in terms of leading to the loss. But one of the reasons why Cal was able to move the football was Jacob DeJesus had a big game. The slot receiver spot, they weren't able to really slow him down. Caleb Cost, definitely, part of the reason why, but it was a lot of different guys that were on him throughout the night, and just no one could really solve the question of how to keep the ball out of his hands. And I think it's really as simple as you needed better pass rush along that defensive line, and maybe that's the way that you keep the football out of his hands. But I mean, for the most part, Carolina didn't give up big plays down the field. That was something that we were a little bit worried about. You did have on the first drive of that second half that big pass interference call on Marcus Allen. That was very important as well. So just some little things that Carolina's got to be able to clean up if they're going to be able to win games moving forward. All right, now let's get to Gio Lopez. This is interesting because I saw a lot of people still very angry at what they saw from Gio Lopez. A lot of complaining about him being out there over Max Johnson. This was a weird game for Gio for me because, I mean, he's 19 of 35, 167 yards, 5 carries, 11 yards. Again, the offense just not geared to him. I mean, 0 designed runs out of him from the entire night. Those 5 rushes came on scrambles. So Carolina just not even remotely trying to scheme up something in this offense to help their quarterback out, play to his strengths. That's something that is still mind-blowing to me from Freddie Kitchens. But you look at this game and 167 yards, really not terrible on 19 completions. Not great. It's not something that it makes me think that he should be the long-term quarterback for Carolina moving forward or anything like that. But it was good enough to be able to move the ball for Carolina a little bit more efficiently in this game. Thing is, man, he doesn't find the end zone again. He does a good job of taking care of the football, which I think is important. But when you're not able to find the end zone, that's a big part of the reason why Carolina isn't able to score. I mean, they're still struggling on the offensive side of the ball to be able to score points, and he still struggled on throws 5 or more yards down the field. I mean, I think it got better as the game went along. Once he got late in the game, I thought he did a much better job of completing some of those passes downfield, but it still wasn't consistent enough, and I think that's a big part of the reason why you leave this game feeling like Gio Lopez was better, but there's still a lot for him to clean up if he's going to be Carolina's starting quarterback the rest of the year and, of course, going into next year.
Yeah, I don't think he was the biggest issue with Carolina's offense on Friday night. Was he great? Absolutely not. The most disappointing, the most concerning thing is your offensive coordinator who met with the media. I think he talked with them on Wednesday or Thursday, said, hey, there's some things that I could do better to put my quarterback in a better position to be successful, for this offense to be a lot more explosive, dynamic, all the things you're used to hearing an OC say, and it was the same offense. Yeah. In a lot of ways, you could make the argument that Gio Lopez is executing what he's being asked to do. There were a lot of calls, a lot of play calls with passes at or behind the line of scrimmage, a lot of short into intermediate throws where they want to get the ball out of his hands. And for the most part, he does a pretty decent job with those. It's when he tries to push the football down the field is where he has really struggled, where this offense has really struggled. But it's because they don't do it consistently enough to where you really wonder how much they rep it in practice. This is the definition of a dink and dunk offense. This is not an offense that is interested in pushing the football down the field. I wonder if the All-22 is showing that they don't have guys that can get separation. I would say if that's the case, and you probably got these guys running routes that don't fit their skill set, and you're not maximizing their talent, because I think Culliver, Ship, and Pesor are guys that can get open more consistently than what they've probably been opened so far this season. So, I come away with this. I didn't come away more believing in Gio Lopez, but for the first time, it was really hard for me to look at the reason why Carolina struggled the way they did on offense and directly blame him. I thought, for the most part, his decision-making was clean and crisp and concise. For the most part, he got the football out of his hands quickly. But with that just means Carolina really wants to try to dink and dunk their way up and down the football field. And that's just a hard way, I think, to win in modern football. Like, you got to be able to hit big plays. You got to be able to put pressure on the defense. You can hit your layups, but you got to hit your threes. And right now, this offense does not have a 3-point shot in its arsenal. And until that becomes a development, then this is what we're going to get week in, week out. No matter who the quarterback is, this is what Carolina's offense is going to be the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that, I mean, you mentioned that some of the receivers are better than we've seen. I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, these guys just aren't creating separation downfield. I think that's also part of it. You know, we've seen that when they do create separation downfield, especially with a guy like Chris Culver, that they have been able to hit him. I mean, they did it against Charlotte, but that's against Charlotte. Those are corners that are not supposed to be playing at the Power 4 level. And I don't think any of those guys will be playing at the Power 4 level anytime soon. You've got to be able to do that in these games, man. You've got to find a way to win downfield. And that was what we've seen for so many years from Carolina's offense, is that they are able to win downfield, create these big plays through the passing game, and really change the outcome of the game. Because right now, the running game's not going to be able to create big plays like we want them to be able to. The run blocking simply isn't good enough. The run blocking was better in this game, and we'll get to that here coming up, but it still wasn't perfect. So those explosive plays that you're going to hit are not coming from your running game. Maybe it could come from your quarterback if they actually wanted to use him the way that they should be using him. But since Freddie Kitchens doesn't seem to want to do that, I think you really have to rely on this passing game to hit big plays. And the other thing is that when you look at this group, they're not the best or the most athletic group that we've seen at wide receiver, which means that when they catch the football, there is not many yards coming after the catch. I mean, you look at this game, I mean, for Cal, you know, Carolina did a really good job, I thought, of tackling, these receivers. I thought they did a much better job than they've done in previous games. But even still, Cal with 107 yards after the catch. For Carolina, they had 44 the entire game. And there was no one on the team that had more than 13, and that came from Kobe Paysour. So that means that you're catching the ball and pretty much immediately going down. Carolina's got to find somebody that after the catch is able to get out in open space and make guys miss and create some bigger plays, because you're just not creating those plays downfield. So I'll be interested to see if that's something that Carolina is able to do as the season goes along. But yeah, when it comes to what we saw out of Gio Lopez, I mean, I think he was fine. To me, it bought him another week. I think he's going to be your starting quarterback in the game against Virginia. But to me, it's a week-to-week thing. And I think now we're at the point where after this game, you should not see Max Johnson. No offense to Max. I think the story would be amazing if he would be able to come in here and lead Carolina to a bowl game. I don't see it happening. I think especially if Gio is going to start the next game against Virginia, even if Gio does end up struggling, I find it really, really hard to believe that they're going to go back to Max Johnson at that rate, because in order to get into a bowl game, he would have to suffer just one loss over the course of the final 5 games of the season. The team would have to go 4-1 to make a bowl game. I don't see that happening. And so to me, you've got to evaluate the rest of this roster for the remainder of the year moving forward. I mean, that's the approach that I think you have to go with. That's where you would bring in probably either one of your true freshmen. More than likely it would be Arturi Newkirk, because that's the guy that looks like he is the primary backup. Out of the two of those guys, or at least the third string quarterback right now, not the primary backup. That's still Max Johnson. So, it definitely a game that bought Gio Lopez another week, but not anything to necessarily write home about. Still feels like there is more that can be expected of him, especially if he's going to last here in Chapel Hill beyond this year. You move to some of the other things, and this is where we start to get to some of the positives from this game. You know, we've been talking about some of the negatives or some of the so-so areas. I thought that Kobe Paysour was fantastic in this game. Came into this game with just 2 catches for 18 yards on the season. So was a complete non-factor. Many were probably questioning whether or not he was still even on the team. And he comes into this game and goes off. 7 targets, 6 of those caught for 101 yards. He becomes the first 100-yard receiver of the season so far this year in terms of one single game. So we've had some good games from guys like Jordan Shipp. Some other guys have stepped up and played well in some of these games. Chris Culliver against Charlotte. Javarius Green early in the season against TCU had a pretty good game as well. But no one has had the game that you got from Kobe Paysour. And we said, one of the things that I said writing in the mid-season grades article, and I may have brought it up here on the podcast too, was that Carolina really needed a second guy to emerge at receiver. You've got Jordan Shipp, a guy that you feel like you can trust, and he didn't play a great game the other night. There's a conversation about consistency that has to be had with him. But I think Kobe Paysour was a guy that showed you in this game that he is capable of being that second wide receiver. You're just hoping that moving forward, he's able to create the same type of separation that he was in this game, because if he is, he's shown you he can be pretty productive.
Yeah, I think it was a reminder of how good he is, because I think some Carolina fans just think maybe he was a guy that benefited from the quarterbacks that he's played with in the past, or being in a more wide open offense with what Chip Lindsey had to offer. But he made some plays the other night that no wide receiver has made so far this season. He played with an emotion that I think this team could really benefit from. There was a fire that every time he made a play, he got up and would just spin the football or yell or scream, and just something that I think the team kind of fed off of. And it was the real delight to watch, and it was really refreshing to watch, because you and I both know how good he is. We've both been big fans of him really since that 2022 season where he really broke out when Josh Downs was injured. And so he made some plays the other night that gave Carolina a chance. And I think you got to like the fact that Gio Lopez was going after him. And I think you got to like the fact that Freddie Kitchens was going after him. You're talking about, he had 6 catches on 7 targets. So they did try to start force feeding him the ball. And that's a good thing, because he's an explosive playmaker when he gets the football in his hands. So it was really cool to see. It was really fun to watch. And hopefully he can build off of this game moving forward, and maybe him and Gio can really build some chemistry here down the stretch, because I do think that if he can continue to put up that similar production, then it'll make the game easier for Shipp. It'll make the game easier for Shinar Clower, Chris Culliver, whoever it is on the field, because when you get to game 6 and you've yet to have a 100-yard receiving game from an individual wide receiver, man, defenses know that. These coordinators know that. The game plan knows that. And so they're really just crowding everybody and trying to make someone make plays. But now that they've seen what Kobe Paysour has done, they got to take into account what he's capable of doing, and it puts some sort of pressure on the defense. And so hopefully this could be a building block for him individually in Carolina's pass game moving forward, because a big reason why they haven't been explosive is they haven't been able to get the defenses to respect what they can do through the air. And now that will not be the case this upcoming game, because now you'll have to be somewhat respectful of what Kobe Paysour is doing, even with Gio Lopez playing quarterback.
Yeah, and he did a lot of this work on the outside when he was split out wide, was in the slot for 10 snaps. So they kind of moved him around. They were a little bit versatile with him, which is something that I really like that Carolina does. I mean, they've used him and Shipp in the slot a little bit more as the season has gone along. So I do think that's certainly something that you're really hopeful for if you're a Carolina fan, is that these guys working in the slot will be able to create a little bit more separation, and it'll lead to some of these bigger plays. But yeah, a hat tip to Kobe Paysour, even if this isn't something that extends over. I mean, this is a great game for him because he's been through so much ever since he broke both feet in the same season. He just hasn't been the same. I mean, he wasn't the same last year. He wasn't the same at the start of this year. And so this was a great game for him to turn back the clock and show people that he is capable of being a reliable wide receiver. And yeah, if I'm Gio Lopez, this is one of the guys I'm looking for, man, moving forward. This is one of those guys that I feel like now I can trust. And that's the big thing, is getting to a point, especially with Gio, because he's a guy that still struggles with anticipation. Brian Granada says, can't get yards after the catch when the throw is late. That's certainly something that is valid, for sure. We've seen that for most of the year, but you need guys that can simply just get open. Then you need guys that are going to find a way to get open for their quarterback. And Kobe Paysour, we know, is capable of doing that. So hopefully that's something that we see extend over throughout the rest of the year. You move to the other positives in this game. I think the running game definitely was one of the positives, because they had decent success despite Jamon June not really doing anything. Now, part of it was that Jamon June didn't get a lot of carries in this game, didn't get a lot of snaps just in general. Carolina realized early in the game that things were not necessarily working well for him. They only gave him 4 snaps in the entire game. And so then it turned into Benjamin Hall and Davian Goss playing the rest of the game for Carolina. And so, those guys, I think, really stepped up. Benjamin Hall actually played 26 snaps overall. June just 10 snaps. Got that one wrong, or at least Pro Football Focus got it wrong in the rushing statistics area. You see Jamon June only get that percentage of the snaps. It probably would concern you. I mean, if you had told me that pregame, I would have told you Carolina gets absolutely blown out in this game. There's no way that they find a way to be successful when they're playing, Davian Goss and Benjamin Hall, especially behind this offensive line that just isn't blocking the way that it needs to. And especially if Benjamin Hall is going to be the guy that takes the majority of the carries in this game. But he was solid, put together his best performance of the season, best performance of his Tar Heel career, 14 carries, 68 yards, and a touchdown. I thought he ran with a nice edge for Carolina, did a really good job of picking his spots and hitting the hole when he needed to, better than any of the games that we've seen so far. And we know he's the guy that sort of dances around sometimes, a little too patient at times, but I thought he was really good in this game at making things happen when there wasn't a ton of blocking necessarily in front of him. And then Davian Goss, I think when he was in there, again, just making plays. It goes back to our question about why Davian Goss isn't seeing more playing time. We've heard that, Mac Brown players not necessarily held in the highest regard, not as high a regard as some of the players that were brought in with Bill Belichick. This is one of those guys that feels like an example, because every time he's on the field, it seems like he is doing something. I mean, 6 carries, 31 yards in this game. More importantly, finds the end zone again in this game. So, I mean, he's a guy that we want to see more of moving forward. I would love if it was Jamon June and Davian Goss receiving the majority of the carries with Benjamin Hall as sort of that third guy. But Benjamin Hall stepping up and making plays in this game, he deserves a lot of credit, especially with the run blocking, which was arguably the best that it's been all season, but that's not necessarily saying much from a Carolina perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky to figure out what's the right balance when talking about Carolina's run game, because I can applaud what Benjamin Hall did, but also question why you quit running Jamon Jr. for 4 carries, especially when he's the type of back that, we've talked about it through the first 6 games. We had Brent Renner on, and he talked about it as well. Like, we compare him to that Ryan Houston, Anthony Elzey, a hybrid of a running back, which means he's going to be a guy that gets better the more he touches the football, which means if he has just 4 carries just for 10 yards, you should not overreact and think, well, he just doesn't have it. And so I think that's it's been the biggest issue, I think, with what Carolina has done offensively this year. And I don't know if this is a Belichick, if this is a Kitchens, or if it's a combination of the two. It just seems like they are really quick to pull the trigger. And if a guy doesn't make an immediate impact, they just look somewhere else. And the run game is, for the most part, it's a gradual thing where you're supposed to get longer and more productive carries the further the game moves along. There aren't many times you come out and you just run it right down your throats, unless you're the Carolina Panthers giving the ball to Rico Dowdle, who it feels like every time he touches the ball, it's 8, 9, 10 yards a carry. So it's kind of weird where I thought they ran the ball efficient the other night. And I was pleased to see what Benjamin Hall did, especially after I tweeted out why he was on the field. 2 plays later, he was in the end zone. I think Davian Goss, every time I watch him run, I ask myself, why does he run more? Because he just runs with a certain edge that no one on this roster has. There's an explosiveness, there's a physicality to him that no one on the roster can match. And then I felt bad for Damon June because he did nothing wrong, but it felt like he got punished because he didn't get to touch the football the way that I want him to touch the football, which is 12, 14, 16 times a game. So they've got to find a way to stay committed to guys if they have a slow drive or two and just realize that, until this offense finds a legitimate rhythm and an identity, it's going to be up and down for these guys individually and collective as a unit. With that being said, the way that Carolina was able to run the ball, 4.1 yards a carry, it allowed them to kind of stay in the game, manage the clock, and kind of shorten the game in a way that they need to keep their defense fresh. So it's something they can build off of, because if they can average 4 yards a pop in the rest of their games moving forward, I do think it does lend to this offense being more competitive here down the stretch.
Yeah, I think that certainly is the case for Carolina, and you're just looking for any sort of signs. I mean, Carolina had dipped to in the 120s in terms of rushing yards per game. So everything about this offense was just absolutely terrible coming into this game. And Carolina gets a much better performance passing than they've gotten from Gio Lopez so far this year. And then, you get a much better showing rushing-wise from Carolina overall. I'm with you when it comes to Damon June. I mean, the kid is a true freshman. So if he gets off to a slow start in some of these games, I don't think you should necessarily bail on him. The other thing is that when you look at it, I mean, it's just the offensive line, man. And with Damon June, he is such a north-south guy. There's times where, and this was brought up by Andre Ware on the broadcast, and I do think that he is probably right when it comes to Damon June, that there isn't a lot of patience there. He's a guy that wants to get the ball and go. And for Carolina, that's something that works at times. But I think especially when you're not blocking well, it doesn't necessarily lead to a ton of success. So Carolina's struggling blocking again. They put in the more patient running back in Benjamin Hall, and it works out a little bit better for them. So I think with Damon June, that's going to be one of the things that he's got to work on a little bit is, hey, let's just be a little bit more patient. When you were in high school, you were running behind an offensive line that dominated everybody. So, when you got the ball, it was, hey, immediately hit that hole and let's go to work because we're going to be having a ton of success. I think we've seen this year, Carolina's just not that good run blocking wise. It doesn't matter how hard you try. They are not going to be that improved. I thought this was as good as they looked in run blocking, and, give them credit for that. But even there were still moments in this game where I didn't think they blocked all that well in the run game. I still think, if you look at some of the grades that they got for this game, they're pretty accurate. There were still moments where, guys simply just whiffed on blocks right in front of them, or just couldn't hold up altogether and were getting driven back. That's certainly something that Carolina's got to work on. So, I would like to see Damon June be a little bit more involved than he was in this game, even if he is struggling a little bit more moving forward. But we'll see. I think they've just shown us that they're going to ride the hot hand between these three running backs as the season goes along. Now let's move over to the defensive side. Let's talk about some of the positives there, because even though Carolina, struggled to get off the field on third down, it felt like this group took a step forward. First of all, I thought this team tackled a lot better than they did in the first 3 games against power competition. Now, the stats would tell you no. The stats would tell you that with 9 missed or with 10 missed tackles, Carolina still had some issues tackling, but it didn't feel like it was that obvious. It didn't feel like, when Carolina missed tackles, it led to big plays. It felt like if there were missed tackles, there were other guys in the area around the football. Guys did a really good job of swarming to the ball most of the night. So it felt like much more of a team effort. It felt like the communication was there more than it had been in the first 5 games of the season, which is something you got to give them credit for. I mentioned, allowed 107 yards after the catch. Certainly not great, certainly not something that you should be pounding your chest over, but better for Carolina, and hopefully a step in the right direction. So, I thought those were two of the things that really stood out to me. And then individually, I thought there were some guys that really played well. I thought Tyler Thompson looked really good in the limited snaps that he had. I mean, he played 22 snaps, had 3 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 3 total quarterback pressures. I think he's a guy that hopefully moving forward, Carolina will look at and potentially think about playing more. Do I think he's a perfect player? No. There is still some concerns about him holding up in the run game, especially at his size, because he is a smaller player. But to me, I think you need to see him on the field in some obvious pass rushing situations moving forward, because some of what we saw early in the season from Milcard Abujaday just really wasn't there. You didn't see that in this game. You haven't seen it in the last couple of games. And, Smith Vilbert is really just a body taking up space out there most of the time that he's on the field. So you need somebody that's going to be a little bit more impactful. I think Tyler Thompson may potentially be that guy. I thought Andrew Simpson was tremendous, played every snap for Carolina, 3 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 3 total quarterback pressures. So they were blitzing him throughout the night, and he did a decent job of getting pressure despite being a little bit smaller when he would line up on the edges than some of the guys that Carolina had out there. And then 2 pass breakups as well. He was really good in coverage. That's something that he and Kamori House at times have struggled with this year. They've been picked on in that area. And yet somehow, this was a game where he was able to come up with 2 pass breakups and was much more successful. And then I thought Greg Smith III on the back end at the safety spot, Carolina played him all over the place. They played him in the box. They played him, it almost looked like a hybrid linebacker spot. At times he played in the slot. He was all over the place, but he was really good. And just 19 snaps, had 3 total tackles, a great pass breakup, and was targeted 3 times in coverage, allowed just 1 of those to be caught for 5 yards. Certainly a guy that I think should see more snaps the rest of the way. So, those were the guys that really stuck out to me on defense. And as I said, I thought as a unit, much better in terms of some of the fundamental stuff that we saw out there.
Yeah, I'll start. I thought that was the best game plan we've seen in a power conference game from Steve Belichick. I thought he was creative. I thought he was exotic. I really felt like he kept the Cal offense and Saga Pucatelli. I thought they were just off balance all night, which is a credit to him. And I think it allowed Carolina to put their most competitive defensive performance all year long, because you gave up 294 total yards. You gave up just 80 rush yards on 31 carries. That equals out to 2.6 yards per rush, and they were 6 of 16 on 3rd down. If that's what Carolina can be defensively down the stretch. Oh, by the way, they had 6 tackles for loss. If Carolina can replicate that more often than not, I still don't have any more. I don't know how many games they're going to win. They'll be in just about every game. They'll be competitive. And after what happened the first handful of games, I think we'll take competitive right now as opposed to getting blown out. So big credit to him. I thought that, and what an aggressive game plan does is that it instills confidence in your players, that you trust them, that you can put them in these situations and they're not going to get beat. They're not going to miss tackles. They're not going to make mistakes. And so I think in a lot of ways it allowed them to play more free. I thought the communication, as you mentioned, was a whole lot better as well, which is somewhat odd considering you didn't have Thaddeus Dixon, your best defensive player. But it looks like whatever they did during the week off and then the week leading into the game, the players bought in, they were receptive to the game plan, and they executed to a level they have not executed so far. And you saw some glimpses of what guys can be. Tyler Thompson, as you mentioned, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 3 total pressures, and 22 snaps. He's got to put on some weight, got a little bit bigger to become a much better run defender, but that could be a building block for them moving forward. Andrew Simpson, really like the guy. That was the first real big game where he played great individually, but the defense didn't look back collectively That's what you were expecting when you brought him in from Boise State. Then you had Greg Smith, as you mentioned, there on the back end making plays. So you had guys at all three levels step up, make plays, and it's just encouraging because that's what we needed to feel coming out of this game. As much as we wanted to win, I think, just coming away feeling positive about the direction and encouraged about where this team and this program is going under Belichick was a big thing. And with the way the defense looked the other night, if they can be closer to that moving forward, then some of these games that we wrote down as losses may still be losses, but they could be much more competitive than maybe we thought a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and that's really all we're hoping for. And that's the biggest thing I think that we have to say about this game is we just saw a better effort across the board. And, Brent Renner brought it up to us. He said that he thought the TCU game, you could see that the effort was there. The Central Florida game, you could see that the effort was there, which, that one I sort of questioned a little bit more. But, even still, it was clear that in the Clemson game, Carolina's effort was off. This was a team that just looked disinterested, especially once they got down 2 touchdowns early in the game. And once you turned it off, it would allowed Clemson to just completely take over the game. This was a team that looked bought in, that looked motivated, that they wanted to prove something to this fan base, to the rest of college football. And hopefully that's the type of effort that we're going to see moving forward for Carolina the rest of the season. Because if you do see that, you talked about it, all of a sudden these games that you had written down as losses, maybe they are still losses. They're going to be more competitive. Maybe they do turn into wins for you. And maybe this team is able to get to 4 or 5 wins, maybe possibly even sneak into a bowl game. I think that's probably unlikely at this point, but even still, it's going to be a lot easier to come on here to talk about this team if they're giving effort, and we've got some good things to talk about like we did in this game. So hopefully that's what we're going to see from them moving forward. All right, really quickly, wanted to let you guys know about our sponsor, just in case you guys haven't seen when we've been bringing them up here recently. Legacy Arcade, the first sponsor here on the podcast. We appreciate them for jumping in. And if you click on or if you take a picture of that QR code or hold your phone up to it, go to that website, plug in the code HEELS, you get up to $100 in free play. And you're saying to yourself, well, what exactly are we going to be playing? Well, you'll be playing your winning cash prizes with games like roulette, blackjack, your favorite slot games, and multiplayer fish games. You can also win cash prizes by playing your favorite arcade games. Use HEELS as the promo code, as we mentioned, to get up to $100 in free match play at registration. It's safe, secure, and with 24-hour customer support. Anytime that you need to contact them, you will be able to. Instant redemption immediately to your bank account or card when you win. Accepts all major credit cards, Skrill and ACH, and Apple Pay is coming soon. So make sure that you guys go over there. Help us out with that. Whenever you guys use that promo code, it's going to help us. That's the way that we're going to get paid. So if you guys could use that for us, we would greatly appreciate it. I mean, I'm a big blackjack guy. I've been on there playing a lot. There's a couple of the arcade games too that are really fun to play on there. So I definitely like to play those, just as a way to get my mind off of what's going on with the Tar Heels and, of course, what's going on with the Giants. If you saw that earlier today, it was heartbreaking to watch the Tar Heels lose. It was probably even more heartbreaking to watch the Giants lose the way that they did earlier today. But hopefully, season will be turning around, but I'll still be on Legacy Arcade when I've got a little bit of free time to win some money. So last thing that I wanted to tell you guys about tonight, there was a recruiting update that we have. Florida 4-star offensive tackle commit Tyler Chukunum, I believe is how you pronounce his name, will be taking an official visit to North Carolina this coming weekend. So the game against Virginia, he is going to be taking a visit. Carolina attempting to flip him from the Florida Gators. So Carolina's doing some real work on the recruiting trail, guys. I mean, the offensive line, they've already flipped one big-time commit from a SEC school in J.B. Shabazz, the in-state guy. Now they're trying to go and flip another guy, this time Someone that's committed to Florida. Makes a lot of sense. Florida just fired their head coach, Billy Napier, so a lot of their guys are going to be available. That's something that hopefully Carolina will be able to take advantage of. I'm trying to think if there were any other guys that ended up committing there back that Carolina had on campus. I think, if I remember correctly, his name is slipping my mind, but there is a tight end prospect that Carolina was going after. So maybe keep an eye out for him to be someone that Carolina takes a look at here closely over the next few weeks. But that is a chance for Carolina to make another flip along the offensive line, bring in another extremely talented player. So we'll keep you up to date on all of that. And any other recruiting notes that come out, we'll have you covered, as well as, of course, all the game stuff that we have up there for you. Make sure you go back, read the recap of the game for you guys. Goes a little bit more in depth on some of my takeaways from the game. So make sure that you guys do that. We would greatly appreciate that. Meanwhile, we do have plenty of coverage that'll be coming up for the rest of the regular season. We did have the midseason grades that were up there for you guys. Make sure you go back and check those out. Now, again, those came before this game, so it wasn't exactly midseason, but it felt like with us in the bye week, that was the perfect time to do it. Make sure you go back and read those. All those are now in the rear view now, and that means that we will just be previewing games, recapping games for you, giving you any of the availability reports before the games. Remember that Carolina does not have a non-conference game the rest of the season, so we'll have an availability report for every single game that Carolina plays the rest of the way that we'll be getting up there for you. And then any other news that comes out around the program, any news that comes out recruiting-wise, we will have you covered. Meanwhile, on the basketball side of things, getting close to the start of the season for Carolina, they just played a scrimmage up at Asheville at the Cherokee Casino. So we are going to have a recap edition of the podcast that we're going to be doing for you guys. So make sure that you guys are checking that out on these same platforms that you're watching this. And then in terms of the website stuff, it's going to be recaps, previews for every game this season. That'll be coming from Josh for you guys for the most part. So make sure that you keep an eye out for all those. Of course, the first game that Carolina will be playing will be the game against Central Arkansas to open the season, but they do have a scrimmage prior to that. They do have, of course, the scrimmage coming up this Friday with BYU, and then you have the exhibition game that Carolina plays right before the start of the season. I'm forgetting who exactly that opponent is for Carolina, but still, that is going to be a chance to get a look at them before the start of the season. We'll have you covered with all of that. And as I mentioned, the Four Corners podcast will be going live tomorrow for you guys to recap the scrimmage that Carolina played in Asheville. So make sure that you guys keep an eye out for that on these same channels that you are watching this edition of the podcast, on Twitter, on Facebook, and over on the YouTube page. Make sure if you're on that YouTube page, you do hit subscribe for us. We would greatly appreciate that. If you go over to the Twitter page, hit the follow button. Make sure you turn on those post notifications, because, again, the only thing that gets posted on that feed are our articles, our videos. That's it. So it's just straight our content. So you guys will get notified anytime that there is any new piece of content up there for you guys. And make sure you go over and like that Facebook page as well. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.